Welcome to Book Talks with Colors of Influence. I am your host, Maylene Hamtow. I am an avid reader and reviewer of books for my book blog, Colors of Influence, and I also review books for outlets and platforms such as City Books, Hollow Hollow Review, Book Sirens, Readsy, and the Nonfiction Authors Association. So, just a quick overview. Book Talks focuses on fiction and nonfiction works that highlight issues of diverse identities, equity and inclusion, social justice, Indigenous ways of being, and decolonial approaches to the struggle for liberation. I talk to authors whose works contribute to a nuanced understanding of various cross cultural contexts of our shared humanity and common dreams. So today, I am honored to have Deborah Jiang-Stein, a national speaker and founder of the unPrison Project, a 501c3 nonprofit working to empower incarcerated women and girls with life skills and mentoring to prepare for a successful life after prison. Deborah was born heroin addicted to an incarcerated mother. She is the author of the memoir Prison Baby and her latest release, a collection of short stories, Lucky Tomorrow, published by the University of Minnesota Press. And in her talks on leadership, Deborah chronicles the challenges and stigmas that have plagued her, that were all compounded by her multiracial identity, her journey to transformation, and the search to overcome adversity led her to find triumph against great odds. She has reframed herself into the positive force that she is today, a writer, an entrepreneur, speaker, and mother. And from rebellion to survival, Deborah conveys through her unique perspective that although progress is not always linear, it is always possible. And so, as I mentioned, this episode focuses on her debut collection of short stories, Lucky Tomorrow, which has received wonderful reviews from across the spectrum. And I just want to say that Deborah has also received high praise for all of the work that she has done, her life's work in providing support and advocacy for women and girls, shared by no other than feminist icon Gloria Steinem, who has written. Deborah has shown us that we have neighbors. Our neighbors are wrongfully shut off by walls, and we are supposed to behave as if they aren't our neighbors, but in fact they are. We can go past those walls and discover that the people who are there are way more same as us than different, and that under the same circumstances that they've lived, we might be there too. Gloria writes, I am grateful for the opportunity to both understand that and to have gone with Deborah past those walls and discover that we are all one community. So I also had the opportunity to review Lucky Tomorrow, and you can read the full review by visiting the link in the description of this YouTube channel. So I just wanted to read a quick excerpt. From flower street vendors to families torn apart by ambition, to a woman on death row awaiting redemption amidst a tumult of memories, Jiang-Stein vividly depicts their struggles. And each story is set in various cities where she has lived, in Seattle, in Minneapolis, and Tokyo. And while these settings differ, they share a common indifference toward human suffering. And in Lucky Tomorrow, each vignette offers a glimpse into the harsh realities that are often difficult to confront, yet are grounded in the lived experiences of those frequently unseen and cast aside. And Lydia Yuknevich, author of Thrust and Reading the Waves, writes, I have a theory that the most important experiences of human life often happen in a profound periphery, in places decentered or even hidden from mainstream attention. The stories and characters in Lucky Tomorrow are like brilliant stars that dropped out of the night sky, screaming, I exist, I endure, I have a voice. Deborah Jiang-Stein has rearranged the cosmos to give grounded angels their songs back. Every page of this book is a micro supernova of the heart. I got chills just reading that. Absolutely. And then Brittany Cooper, a New York Times bestselling author of Eloquent Rage, writes Lucky Tomorrow is a journey of chance encounters, a series of opportunities to experience the majesty of everyday people, to dip one's toes briefly into the ocean of someone else's inner life, and to be reminded that these small intimacies and the people who carry them are precious. So, with that, welcome, Deborah. It's such an honor to have you here. Thank you so much for joining Book Talks.
Thank you for inviting me. I've been looking forward to this.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in. If you could share a little bit with us, what is the significance of publishing the short story collection at this stage in your career and also your literary life?
That was an interesting question when I first thought about why now and why am I here now. I mostly have written nonfiction, but my true love has always been fiction. I started out writing poetry, and that's impossible to sell, but I wasn't trying to sell any of my writing. It wasn't about the business of writing. And that for me, turned into writing short stories. So this Lucky Tomorrow is really a culmination of years spent listening to people, watching. My memoir Prison Baby was out, so I felt kind of relieved that I put a story out there that I've been working on for quite a while. And it feels like the right moment to call attention now to people who are in the margins and in the sidelines, and why are they out there and we are in here, but we are also out there. And so I'm feeling that calling attention to especially the women is just a good time to pay attention and look for more empathy in readers, hopefully, and in our society. And it's also was a timing issue. I've had the courage, so why now? I think I had the courage to get these short stories out there, and also the synchronicity of the University of Minnesota, us coming together, how it came about, and it's been a beautiful partnership, and I'm so grateful that they're putting this book out there.
It's a beautiful book, and thank you for noting your background and passion for poetry, because that really shows up a lot in your writing. And also from my reading, I noted how many of the stories relate the narratives of women, as you mentioned, aunts, daughters, mothers, friends. Can you share more about the characters, why you chose those characters, and also the stories that you chose to focus on?
I think Well, this is interesting. I feel like they chose me. They came to me with their voices, with their ideas. I know I'm the creator of the words on the page in some ways, but I also think I was really given those words by the characters. And it's really a combination of people I've seen or witnessed. I've been inside so many prisons, men and women, but mostly women, almost 50,000 women face to face across the country. So that is a lot of voices and faces and joys and fears and sorrow to listen to and pay attention to. And I'm not taking those stories, but I have been more interested in the inner lives of women, and I'm a woman, so I know that inside world for me.
Yeah, and thank you again for kind of bringing life to the stories and sharing them with the world. It's really important to, as you mentioned, for all of us to have to develop that empathy, understand the inner lives of folks who are often, forgotten, cast aside. And so I was wondering, I know that your debut book was your memoir, Prison Baby. And so I was just wondering, how did elements from your personal narrative, if any of them, got incorporated into the stories here in Lucky Tomorrow?
Lucky Tomorrow, it's not autobiographical, clearly, but I'm pieces of me show up in it. And I was thinking about your beautiful introduction of me, and thank you for that. And I've come in a recent kind of language rather than say, because babies actually aren't addicted, because that's a very common conscious act. But for someone like myself, I was born heroin exposed. And so that's the language that I'm using. And I brought that into this character, but reversed it. One of the characters is a mother in Lucky Tomorrow, and she has had her infant taken away from her and removed. So people who know me will recognize, and I noticed that I think you said in your review, lightly disguised, they'll recognize who I am in there and some of the trails of my story. But again, the characters just appeared for me and showed up, and it's a conglomerate of many, many people that I've seen and circumstances, and it's their imaginations that have transformed my writing of the characters. So they're very live for me, actually.
Yeah, and thank you so much for pointing out that nuance with the language that's used between heroin exposed. That's really important. I appreciate that call out. So we'll definitely be mindful
Well,
of that.
and I'm learning that too. I mean, the language changes around many things. I mean, people in prison aren't inmates, it's people first. They are people in prison, even though if they call themselves that inside, but language changes all the time. So I'm trying to apply it and have it fit in.
Thank you for your graciousness. And the next question that I have has my wondering about, what is the significance of setting place in the three cities that you've selected, right? Like Minneapolis, Tokyo, and Seattle. I know from your background that you have lived in those cities, but yeah, if you can share more about that.
Yes. It's actually started with that and my travels in the South into prisons, mostly in the South. I'm going to Texas next week to give a commencement speech in a prison. So where I anchor for both living and working, I start getting the flavor of the place and the people. And everywhere is, of course, different, not only just different weather, but every city has its own rhythm and shadows and light. And so to me, the places are a character, actually. And in this book, I was writing about the places as a character for the characters. So they have a presence. And I also, if I've lived somewhere, I just know the feel of it and I can write in detail about the streets and the transportation and the water or the mountains, the whole atmosphere and texture of a city. So we decided together with the publisher to allow those three areas and regions to show up.
So, kind of related to our conversation about place, I also wanted to ask about the audience that you had in mind when you were writing these stories. Did you have a particular audience when you first started putting these stories together?
I actually didn't. I write because I love to write, and I don't think about a reader. If that happens later for me, but some people write directly for the reader and an audience and for publication. I've been writing some of these stories, I mean, 10 years ago, and I had no idea if anyone would read them. I might have read some to a small audience. So then I realized that I started to see I am writing for fiction writers, but also for people who are interested in women and women's issues, and in some ways, maybe the stories can be like a mirror for people to see themselves a little bit. And again, like we talked earlier, to just maybe pull out some empathy for not only the injustices, but where are their disparities and why are they there and how are we a part of it? And I wasn't using fiction to do that, but it just shows up in my writing because it's in my work, it's what I see.
Thank you so much for that, Deborah. And now we're getting to my one of my favorite parts of these interviews, which is to ask you if you could kindly read us a short excerpt from the book. So, we have talked about Lucky Tomorrow and sort of the atmosphere that you have built, the stories that you have focused on, and we've piqued the audience interest about this wonderful collection of short stories. So if you could read us a short excerpt, and before you read the excerpt or perhaps after, if you could share with us why you chose that excerpt.
Absolutely. I'll set this section up. It's in the first story, actually. And the character Thelma has a flower cart. She's a vendor. on a corner in Seattle, but also she also shows up in the Midwest. And so I'm going to read the towards the end of that story, and she talks about her business because it's a small business to her. Business takes patience, so I waited for a customer, just like when I started in Seattle. That's when I first sketched on cocktail napkins, too. I picked them up at coffee shops, stuff a stack of them in my pocket. Just because I sell flowers doesn't mean I get enough of them. So I draw petal shapes and bouquets and single stems in a vase, all with color pencils and sometimes watercolor. Have to use my most gentle touch or the napkins tear. Can't use oil paint either on napkins, or I'd try that. Isn't the fancy art in Europe all painted in oil? One day I'll get to Europe, wander around the royal gardens on Pond Garden, how all their flowers are lined up in rows with hedges carved into shapes. Fascinating, even though not my style. Not the style of nature either. She wants to grow unlined up and unruly. My favorite is watercolor, how it lives between intention and spontaneity. And the main character is the water in this art, even though color gets all the attention and credit. Watercolors and drawing are my friends and company over anything else, even food, even books. Soon as I made my first flower sale, a single stem of butterscotch broom, I know I had it in me. I was in business. My sign worked too, about a lucky tomorrow and for keeping customers. Besides the regulars, new ones stop by to ask if it's true about the luck. Absolutely, I said. They bought a flower too, and with my ever-changing arrangement of the day's most colorful blossoms. Maybe one day I'll frame one of my napkin sketches and sell that too. Flowers are all that's anchored in this world, though not for long. At least they have roots, and flowers are always a treasure at first, but they're destined to droop. You can trust flowers, even trust they'll disappear. Flowers make it easier to defy the tyranny of fear inside and to melt the sludge of grief, even help me trust myself. Flowers are what rescue me from the devouring cloudy skies. My favorite wearing flower is a peach and coral poppy. A bush flower I love is Scotch broom, the sunny purple yellow it blossoms. Some people say it's a hazardous weed, but even what's unwanted can be beautiful. And my favorite on the ground flower is pansy. I figure a flower is what's constant in this world, if nothing else. Well, that and the ocean waves, the way they want to swallow us up, but usually don't. Some say to offer a small bouquet of flowers to the ocean as a way to say thank you and show respect. Another thing, flowers are everywhere at once. You can hold a flower in your hand and its fragrance is everywhere. Who's to say that fragrance doesn't come alive 5 miles away, like spiritual fuel, all at once? Just like people, here I am right in front of you, but my heart might be in another city, my fondest memory in a different city, and somewhere else, my yearning for where I'll be in the future. Everywhere all at once. That actually, I we went through a couple title ideas. So one of them was Everywhere All at Once, but I know that's a film,
Right, that's right. Yeah.
which I haven't seen. And then also to anchor in this story, I love to watercolor, I love flowers, and I love water. I like open ocean and open sea. So it all kind of shows up in this section. Well, it shows up throughout the book, right? But this
Absolutely.
character is in love with some of those things too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that excerpt with us. It really shows sort of the poetic elements of your writing too, Deborah,
Mm,
and the way that you're able to kind of bring about not just the you mentioned earlier in our conversation about bringing the atmosphere of the place, but so you've kind of really evoked a lot of that imagery too with that particular excerpt.
mm.
Yeah.
Thank you for telling me that. And she talks about how being unwanted, which is really what we were talking about people who might feel or be treated like they're not wanted. So I brought that into this section as well.
Absolutely. Now, what did you learn about yourself while putting this book together?
Um, well, I learned a lot of patience, first of all, because I mentioned earlier that I wasn't writing for readers or writing for publication. So as kept writing just for myself and my love of words and language and escape and imagery, I learned about, well, first of all, how to better craft a story. I'm self-taught. I completely as a writer, I've taught myself by reading and talking to other writers, but I can't say that I'm in that world a lot. I'm mostly influenced by visual art and music. And I learned how much that is an influence in me, which I think shows up. I feel musical in the words that I write. I do read and I read a lot, but I learned how much I'm really more visual in my influences creatively. And then I learned just to ask my question for myself that I'm really asking the readers, why do we walk by people who are street people or street vendors? Or I mean, if they're yelling at us, I get it, but there are all kinds of people on the street asking for money or selling something or pitching a religion or singing or reading poetry, and most people walk by, which is, I'm curious about that. I don't judge it, but it's interesting. And so I learned about that whole part of me of asking the question and then bringing it into the writing.
Absolutely. Appreciate you noting that. And Deborah, if I could just go back to something that you mentioned earlier about, when we were talking about why now, you mentioned that, kind of bringing to life women's stories and kind of focusing on the inner lives of women. I was just wondering if you could share a little bit more about your thinking about that. I know that your life's work has been, about advocating for women who are incarcerated and children as well. So yeah, if you could just share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think my belief is that we, as a human being everywhere, have more in common than we don't have in common. And there's so much division and hate and rage and fury, a lot of it for good reason. But when it's targeted at people or communities because of difference, what I see is that there's a lot more in common underneath at the heart. And so I think why now, especially without getting in the weeds on now, I think there's more and more division, which means to me more reason to come together and to pay attention. And so the little guy in the street will be the last one to get attention, or as people are fighting for other things. And so that wasn't a conscious thing in the beginning, but I think now especially, I sort of feel like we're at an all hands on deck stage right now. Everybody needs to show up with paying attention to what's just, and where is there compassion, where can we have more empathy. Those little fire things where you break the glass and pull the stick and pull the emergency. That's how I feel we are in that state of needing compassion for one another. So all hands on deck is what I say.
All hands on deck.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And again, thank you for devoting your life to kind of raising attention or making sure that lives uh and stories that are often overlooked are get the attention that they deserve so people can get the support that they deserve. And in your literary life, right, like you have also done that and made sure that we can pay attention and muster that empathy, that compassion, so that we can care for our neighbors. And going back to the question about, what did you learn about yourself, putting the book together? The flip side of that is what would you have done differently in the process of bringing this book together?
Honestly, I think I would have just allowed myself to trust myself more. I had a lot of self-doubt early on because I'm self-taught mostly as a writer. And so I had doubt whether I was doing it a way that was acceptable. Once I realized I wanted some publication. And then what I started, so what I would have done differently is not have that doubt, because I realized even if it's not the audience I intended, eventually there will be an audience. Like now, eventually the book will be out and in people's hands. And it's not for everybody. Some people will not like a story that's a page and a half, and some people say that's just perfect. It can end there. And then I think I just would have had less hesitation, but really every step of the way I've learned more to trust myself. And I was thinking about one of your earlier questions. Because of my start in life, I traveled, I'm a product of foster care and later adoption, a transracial adoption. And for adoptees, we're always making up stories. We tell stories, especially for those who don't know much about their background. And so it's kind of a natural thing to just make up stories, I think. And so that showed up in my characters as well.
Absolutely. And I can't thank you enough for, again, bringing these stories to life, Deborah, and this offering that you have for the world, right? For the audience that will be getting this book in their hands shortly. Is there anything else that maybe you'd like to mention, or maybe something that I forgot to ask?
Um, well, something's come up for me recently. When I finished this book, I felt I've got those stories out there, and I was ready to move on either to a new form or poetry or maybe a book of essays. And then the characters started showing up again. This flower vendor kept showing up, sort of an afterlife of the book. And I thought, it's possible that there might be a second collection of stories, not exactly the same people, but with some common threads. And so that might be next in my life, but it surprised me, and I don't know that for sure.